right, welcome to the 10th DesignCourse.com Design Challenge, and I chose black and white logo design as the topic, just because, as I mentioned, I know it's a recurring theme around a lot of the design challenges, and that's the overusage of drop shadows, gradients, inner glows, outer glows. So I really wanted to see what would happen if I restricted all of these excessive effects, really, and just restricted it to only one color, well, black's not a color, of course, as somebody had to point out, but you know what I mean. So the results were overall pretty good, and I think hopefully it helped a lot of you learn something about logo design, and that it's not about all these extra effects. You know, the core logo needs to work in black and white. So before I get to the reviews real quick, I want to, of course, spam my service, which is basically DesignCourse Premium. And we've been at it for roughly 2 months now. And those who've joined and those who've used DesignCourse Mentor specifically, which is the one-on-one design training module with myself, I have found a lot of use and help from it. So just think about, you know, the review that I'm about to do for your design, your logo design specifically. I multiply that by like 100, and that's what DesignCourse.com Premium is, because I work specifically with you throughout multiple projects to really try to make you a better designer. And of course, it's a monthly thing. If you join with the promo code down here, it's $39.95 a month, and you can cancel at any time. So if you only want to do 1 month, that's $40. You know, it's like the price of going out at a dinner with your girlfriend once, you know, except this has a much better payoff. You know, you're improving your skills big time, all right, in just 30 days as well. All right, so with that said, let's go ahead and move on. All right, so the first post, the submission I got is from MXV Design, and I was actually very impressed with this design because it's really good. And the idea that it's whimsical, it's stylistic, it's not just a very, you know, it's not a photorealistic presentation or representation of a nut. It's stylized. I like that a lot. I also like how it's actually made into a U as well, and that's seen right here. And so honestly, I do not have too much or anything bad to say about this. I mean, it's really good. I like it. I mean, if I really got nitpicky, which is unnecessary kind of, you can kind of move it up a little bit here because it's a little bit closer down here, but that's not a big deal. This is a really good design in my opinion, so there's not too much that I could say against it. All right, so Saint WP. Now this one has an issue, and the idea that this text down over here and to the right, it's warped too much. So when you have this logo that's especially on like a smaller size that's being scaled down, you see that it becomes hard to distinguish what exactly it says. It almost looks like an M at this point. So there's too much distortion of the text occurring for it to be effective. So that's the big thing that I would remedy about this, is trying to make it probably, you know, you can distort and transform and warp the text, but only a little bit, because otherwise it becomes too difficult to read. And you want your business name or your client's business name to be immediately recognizable and identifiable and easy to read. All right, so that's what I would say about that. As for the nut, it's kind of hard to tell that it is a nut just by looking at the shape and the form here. But yeah, the major concern is the text, and that's what I would work on specifically. All right, so Bamboo Graphics. All right, so I'm going to copy this just because this is real big and it's hard to see in the browser. And I'm going to just paste it right here so we can get an idea of what's happening. All right, so I like the creative idea of thinking out of the box and, you know, combining two different concepts, the idea of an exclamation, which takes care of the excitement factor, and the nut being, you know, the endpoint of the exclamation. And then down here over for the text, I'll get back to this, but over for the text over here, the C, it's a little bit hard to recognize what that is. It almost looks like a Pac-Man, you know, like that game. So I'd probably stay away from that for doing anything this elaborate. You know, when you have a logo that works as a combination mark, which is a combination mark, is a word mark, and then it has a separate symbol. You don't want to try to do too much with the word mark portion in terms of manipulating the text or working with it. You can do small things, but really going after it like this, it takes away from the main symbol. So I would just leave this probably a regular C. And then up here, it feels like it's almost too separate for it to be real effective. And it's also real large in relation to the text. And I say separate in the idea that we have this large portion of the exclamation point up here and then this down here. And it almost feels like it's not a logo. It feels like a multiple parts. It's not a single identifiable unique mark. And the way you can remedy that is if I switch back here, let me see if I could quickly just scroll to one of these to show you an example, is by encasing it in like some sort of elliptical sphere of sorts, so that it really brings everything together. So if you have an object or a symbol that has multiple parts that are separating, you can bring everything together in either a square of some sort or in an ellipse of some sort, and that brings everything together. And so let me see. Okay, yeah. So what I'm talking about, I can probably illustrate it real quick. I don't want to spend too much time, but see if I can do this. So if you bring everything together like this, and let me see if I can play around with the layer, but probably not. What I can do is just actually 1 second. I'm not being smart about this. Let me drag this up and use the magic wand tool. I'll put it like 32, and then image adjustments, invert. It's not going to look great probably. Yeah, that works pretty well. So the idea, what I was talking about, is kind of like doing this sort of thing. It's not perfect though, obviously, because it seems a little bit, oops, let me get this white. There we go. It's not 100% perfect, but because I would probably work with stylizing this a little bit more, but we could see that it does bring everything together by being encased in an ellipse like this. All right, so let's move on to the next one. All right, coming down here, this is from Dylan Nelson. All right, so this is too simple. It's too, I don't want to say too simple, but I mean, there's not enough happening here that's unique for it to be, a real effective logo. We just have a sort of like an oval here, 2 lines on the top and bottom, and there's nothing unique, and there's also probably nothing that's relevant about the company for it to be effective. So I would just keep on watching if you are Dylan, and I really point out some of the effective logos so you can kind of see more of what to do. All right, so Claudio, I don't know why I try to pronounce names. Claudio, all right, Gabriel. All right, so this one is a pretty good logo. I'm going to go back here and paste this in, and I like the font. It really just does feel nutty, but over here I probably work with the tracking or the space between the letters so that it's pushed over more, just because the rest of the letters don't have, they don't combine really, they don't clash. So this creates for a little bit of a, I guess you could say, a complexity issue over here, or clutter issue. Secondly, I do like how the nut is kind of inside the N, but I would probably push it away and create more of a separation, just because if we scale this down, we get to smaller sizes, it becomes a little bit pixelated because it gets thinner than a pixel at this point. And sometimes logos are shown at sizes this small and smaller. So yeah, I would just kind of move it away a little bit. Other than that, I like it. The nut, it could use a little bit of work with the shadows. It's kind of coming in here, but it's continuing down here. But either way, I like it overall. So good job. Let's continue. All right. So DL2904. So the immediate thought that I have here, I have two main concerns here, and that is, if we go in here, the shadows or the highlights here rather, that right here is too thin. So if you scale this down, they're going to become cluttered and lost, and just they're not going to look good. So I would get rid of them entirely, or I would thicken them up. And also, I'd probably try to work with the shape a tad bit more, maybe the highlights, just to maybe make it look a little bit more like nuts. Again, the separation between these two nuts right here, this inner line needs to be more. You need to maybe about 3 or 4 times thicker than what it currently is between these two, because remember, it gets scaled down and you get clutter. And then the second thing is the nuttastic text. There's too much tracking between too much space between each letter. So it feels separated, and it's hard to read, especially if you also emphasize the nut and then the lowercase astic. It's a little bit too much clutter, especially with the type of font that you've chosen as well. So it's fine to choose this type of fonts, but it would be best just to keep a capital N and then UT, the rest of it all lowercase, and then bring it together closer, a lot closer, and be easier to read. All right, so let's go over here. All right, so Velo. All right, so I like this logo design a lot. For some reason, I don't know why, maybe because of the Bell logo from Taco Bell. It felt like Taco Bell logo, but it's actually, it's not. When I went to look for it, the Taco Bell logo looks quite a bit different. But I don't know why. I just felt like it just felt like Taco Bell. But either way, I know that wasn't the intention. You could still tell it's a lot different, but I still do like it. Using the negative space here in this oval to create this very identifiable nut right here. And then I also like the text as well. It seems like the tracking could have been worked with a tad bit between some of these letters. Like over here, we have a certain amount of space between the N and U. And then over here, it feels like we have a lot more space between these two letters. But yeah, that's just something you work individually on each letter. Either way, though, this is a good design, and I like it. All right, so Minifig Steve. Let's see here. So I'm not going to focus on the color one just because it's not necessary for this challenge. But for this one, all right, so a couple things happen here. With the exclamation point, you could tell that it's not a part of this font. Or if it is, it's not consistent with the boldness and the thickness of these letters. It's too tall, and it starts too low, and it's too thin. It seems squished, so it just doesn't fit well with this type. So I'd get rid of that. And then additionally, it feels like it's too cluttered and too cramped in here with being inside this nut, because there's not a lot of space here or here. There's a ton of space up and down, and it's going right in between the letters, and it just feels right off the bat like too much clutter is going on. All right, so I would work on trying to fix that. There's a number of different ways, but I'm not going to go into it specifically just because we're already at 14 minutes. I've done, not too many reviews yet, and we still have a long way to go. So Jazz ID. Okay, so let's see here. We have 4 different options, and just to go through these, this is a unique idea. No one's done a nutcracker, so this is something that could possibly work. I would say having the addition of the nut on the eye. It seems just a tad bit excessive, or if you're going to have it, push a little bit up on top of it and scale it down just a tad bit so it's not thicker than the eye. And then when it comes to the text inside here, it seems like it's almost squished a little bit too much in between here, although it's not too bad. It may just be because that type of font is naturally a little bit squished anyhow. Option 2. Let's see. Again, we have like an issue with white space. The N is touching this over here and over here and over here. Remember, it's always good to have a lot of room to breathe in between the various design elements. So I would scale down the size of the N. And you may have to do the same thing with the the UTASTIC, but that way it will improve quite a bit. This part, Nutastic, I don't know, I guess it depends on the type of nuts that they're selling if you really want to have a silhouette of a squirrel in here. Also, I was kind of curious maybe how this would work on a smaller size. So just because there's a lot of detail when it concerns the nut guy over here. Oops, this is large. 1 second. Scale this down. And let me move up. So can you still tell that that's a squirrel? Yeah, I guess you can. But one thing you can tell right away is the thickness here between the top of the nut and the bottom is not great enough, so it makes it look like way too thin. So that's an area that I would increase the weight space on because that's too thin of a line. If I had to choose between all four, I don't know. It's hard to say. I do like this font, but again, we have a tracking issue right here. You want to bring this closer because everything else is close. Some fonts, they just do that right off the bat, so you have to be wary. You have to check that afterwards. But yeah, this isn't a bad logo design, and I like this one as well. This one, seems just a little bit too crammed up in there for my taste. All right, so Saj Omar, let's see here. Okay, so this I would completely get rid of right away, just because it looks like he's being impelled by the eye up the wrong area, So I would get rid of that because it could be on one of those logo compilations where, something that was not intended to be designed is actually shown in the logo. Anyhow, with that said, I'm not sure if filling in the A with a negative space sort of nut is the best idea, just because it seems like it breaks up the name kind of. It's kind of hard. You can kind of see nut, and then you see like this symbol here, and then STIC, nut stick or something. It's just not a good idea to put it right in the center of kind of just an arbitrary letter. So I would make it kind of what you did here. Basically, you took a nut and you put it over and made it a separate symbol. So this would definitely be the better approach than this. So, I mean, you could just tell 1,000 times better this is than this. And then the only thing down here is maybe it lacks just a little bit of originality or creativity. But either way, big improvement between these two for sure. All right, so somebody joined with the post of Nutastic. All right. So, yeah, this one, you know what? I didn't look at this one before or any of these beneath this point, but this one, it almost reminds me of like an Arab guy or something because he has like the whole, I don't know what the technical terminology, like that hat thing, and then you have like this beard. All right, well, that probably wasn't the intention, right? All right, so the Nutastic thing over here, the end, I'm looking at this, just I'm not immediately aware of what this thing over here is, but I could see you kind of like broke it down. Maybe that's like a branch or something, and it's falling down. It's an interesting idea. I mean, especially if you're gonna if this is intended to be the whole logo, where this is here and then this is here, it's too much. You have to either have it on the left or keep it in here. So I'm not sure if that's your intention or not, but just. If you really wanted to emphasize the U, I'd probably get rid of this thing over here. Just make it a regular N, move this up, and then make sure that, I think maybe the U shape here definitely is recognizable enough. So I think it would be a lot more effective. You get rid of this line up here, drag this up so that it, it sits on the regular horizontal path where the text begins. And I think it would actually be a lot better than everything that's presented here currently. So yeah, M&A design. Let's see here. P.S. I'm a new designer. Okay, so no, this isn't a bad start. It's a little bit complex though, in the idea that you have these different whimsical lines that are coming down here, and then ones originating up here, and then there's a nut. I would try to simplify it a little bit more so than this. Also, the portions of the nut here at the top, when it comes to the lines, the individual lines are a little bit they need work. You could tell they're kind of just hand drawn almost. So I would work on that, trying to make it more uniform and less hand drawn. And also, it doesn't really seem to make too much sense to me to really, have it hanging off this eye portion, because it really doesn't make too much sense in my opinion. But I mean, if you were to take away this and this, this is actually a good word mark in terms of a logo design, because it's very simple and it does flow well, and it's a nice font. So yeah, I would just work on those couple things. And then option 2, I would definitely stick with working with this than over this, just because these connected lines and it's just, this is drastically inferior to what you did up here, in my opinion. All right, so Alexander. All right, so there's too much happening here in terms of this over here. It almost looks like this is like a photograph that was made white and black or something, and there's too much fine details. I don't even really see a nut in here, honestly, so it doesn't seem like this would be very effective. So again, the effective logos for coming up here, they're whimsical. You could tell it's a nutastic. We don't want photo representations or photorealistic nuts for logo designs. Just because it's not unique, people won't remember it. So that's something important to remember. So go back to the basics in terms of and simplicity in terms of logo design. All right, so ISTE, we have my first design. All right, so yeah, this looks like a nut, although I would say there's too much clutter occurring. There's not enough white space. I would scale down the size of the nut, probably move it over a little bit more from the N, and then that way it doesn't feel like it's one big kind of, I wouldn't say mess, because it's not really a mess, but I would work on just trying to position things differently and scaling them down. But otherwise, I kind of do like the Nutastic font that you've chosen, the script font. All right, Tash Designs. All right, so I'm just reading this real quick. All right, so yeah, I actually do like this. It's very simple, obviously. You almost can't tell that it's a nut, but obviously with the name, you can tell that it is. So just looking at this as is, I can't really say too much that's negative about this. I think especially if you used color and you made this a brown and gave it like sort of just a couple highlights or something, it would really definitely stand out. So I like it. All right, so Nikita, we have this might be another. All right, okay. So it seems like this font choice, definitely creative. It feels like it's not a great fit for this type of business. This almost feels like a game type of font, or some type of futuristic or tech font, if you will. Maybe not so much like an organic, nut company font, just because you think of organic, you don't think of these type of lines and intersections, because it's not really based in nature, if you will. Although I definitely like what you've done, outside of thinking about relevance. The U, the top of this being a nut, I would say probably need work on this highlight right here, just because if you're scaled that to get down again, you would find that it probably doesn't scale down too well. It's too much clutter. So work on separating things out, making it a little bit thicker. But yeah, thanks for the submission. All right, Jacob W. Design. All right, so this is, I like this. It's easy to read. So when it comes to the Nutastic part, the exclamation point for the I, that's a unique idea. It works. You can still read it. And I definitely like this symbol right here. There's a lot. It's very simple, obviously. There's not a ton of detail in it. Everything's separated. There's good white space in between here, and so it'll scale down well. So this is a very good design. Good job. Okay, so there's some type of spelling error. I didn't even see it. All right, so Alexander. All right, so again, we're having an issue here when it comes to these fine details, because if you take this again and paste this, scale it down, it's going to end up blurred and like looking blurry and just too much detail, in my opinion. This sort of half ellipse along with these dashes, probably unnecessary as well, especially given how much detail is here already. And then there's too much complexity and collision and clutter occurring right here specifically. You can see if you scale this down, you're going to lose that detail and it's going to look blurred and not good overall. So if I were to have to use this, I would begin it right here. I would have nothing intersecting or getting close to the type. Same thing over here. You can see it went beneath here, and over here I'd start it right here instead of there. So you want to be mindful of not cluttering things. And again, there's too much. There's not enough space between this area and the Nutastic portion. You want to make sure things have room to breathe for sure. All right. So let's go over here. All right, so RTETR. All right, so it's a cartoon squirrel with a nut-shaped mouth. All right, so I like the type. You know, everything very easy to read. It's a nice thick font. I like it. You can't really tell though that there's a nut inside of here. So it kind of just looks like an interesting squirrel character. You could probably work with it though to make it look like there's more of a nut by having like a stem come out here or something, and maybe kind of get rid of the tooth here. Either way, on originality and creativity, this is definitely a plus. But in terms of making it obvious, I would say we could probably work with it a little bit more. All right, then JDEWOJNO. All right, let's see here. All right, so let me copy this. All right, so let's just scale this down for the fun of it. I know there's not going to be any issues in terms of not being able to read it. It seems like this nut portion is just too big in relation to the text. It extends quite a bit up here to the top, and then quite a bit over here to the left, and then down. It just seems like, and also it does seem like it's just kind of unnecessarily cut off right here, and it doesn't feel. I guess you could say it doesn't feel natural in the sense that I'm having a hard time explaining what's wrong with this, but it's just too big and bulky, I guess you could say. If you really want to try to get the nut here and you want to have white space for the letters, I would probably just stick to the N instead of the whole nut, because otherwise you're stuck with trying to convey a whole nut, but it has to be this thick in order to fit within, fits the whole NUT inside of it. Maybe there is a way to do it, but I really can't think of a way to fit all three letters while not still having like a massive symbol here. It just feels like it's a little bit too much, too big and bulky. Other than that, I like the font. So let's go back here. All right, so Josh Turner, you can see he's used some type of distortion on a stroke here of the letters. And again, we're going to run into an issue where we scale this down and then it just starts looking a little bit blurry. I like the idea of it, having, let me go back to 100% here. The idea of kind of emphasizing, enthusiasm through these different types of strokes, but I think there's too much detail on this specific effect for it to be desirable. So I like that idea, and this actually is identifiable as a nut, and it does work as a letter as well, even though it's filled in here. So I think if you were just to take the font right here, all the white, and the nut, and move it out of this black area and then make it black, it would probably be more effective in my opinion. And obviously you'd have to make it black too, but it would definitely be more effective because the nature of the font itself kind of does the same thing as what you're doing here, because the font, you could tell it's a script font, and it's kind of like a Nutastic font, I guess you could say. So yeah, not bad. I would just kind of work on that area. Oh, when you basically did what I just said right here, yeah, this is definitely better than this, in my opinion. There's too much going on here, so that's good. Yep. All right, so Lewis Cool. This is almost the last one. Too much happening here. We have that same issue from a couple entries ago where this nut is just too big in proportion to or in relation to the text. And also I can't exactly tell that this is a nut. It's kind of hard to tell. So I would work on that. And then finally, Peter Falk. I'm sure people butchered that all the time and, you know, called you Peter Fucker right now. Anyhow, Peter Falk, okay. As of moment, 2 days after deadline, no problem. I'll still do a thing here. This is a little bit too much occurring here when it comes to slicing the text in half. It becomes almost disorienting when you look at it. Have you ever seen those optical illusions and stuff they post on Facebook or whatever? It's just a little bit too much going on. Even though it's a simple idea, it creates for so many different parts and elements and colors and all this stuff that it becomes disorienting. So I would get rid of that idea and just stick with a solid color. The nut is pretty easily identifiable, and it would be much more easily identifiable if it weren't cut in half like this. But I like the shape of the nut itself, and it would probably be much more effective if we got rid of that sliced portion that's in there. But anyhow, yeah, thanks for the entries, everybody. Again, I'd like to work with a lot of you one-on-one, so check out for sure designcourse.com/premium. Consider joining, and we'll have a new designcourse.com design challenge announced in a day or two, or at the 3 at most. I'm going to be going away on vacation just for like 2 or 3 days over the weekend. So yeah, I'll post that video before that happens for sure. So all right, I'll see you then. Goodbye.